converting these Inner Circle champions into my custom chapter, the Hallowed Choir's elite protectors, the Canticle Guard. The Canticle Guard are the hand-picked Inner Circle of the chapter master, Kael Sephtar, chosen from the zealots of their order. These are not only warriors, but walking scripture. Their voices harmonize with their leaders to drown out the sounds of battle. Luckily for me, the Inner Circle champion sculpts are pretty close to what I had an ideal of. That's half the reason that I chose Dark Angels for this conversion, is because of these sculpts. But the biggest thing I needed to do was battle damage for the robes. So I started with just using an X-Acto blade, cutting out kind of triangle-shaped little slits at the bottom and on the edges. And then I started to take the tip of that X-Acto knife to make some little tears. And here I am removing a purity seal that I had missed. That's one of the things I do in pretty much all of these conversions, is removing both the Dark Angels icons as well as all the purity seals. You'll notice the one on the chest is still there. I'm going to take care of that in a second. But I moved on to using a pin vise to make some bigger holes, and then making them a little bit irregular with the X-Acto knife. And then here I am cutting off some of that chest emblem. Here in a moment I'll show you the emblems of my chapter if you haven't seen it in a previous video. And it's kind of a derivative of the Dark Angels emblem, but I do need to take these wings off because instead it is a sword with skeletal wings. So I cut off those wings, and on the right side I'm going to try and use some green stuff here to make something adjacent to that. I'm trying to stay strong on my ideal of this kit bashing project of not 3D printing anything, even if I design it myself in Blender. So here I am with green stuff trying to make that emblem. I took some smaller strands to make, I guess, like the bones of the wing. And then here's this bigger strand to make that overarching bone. I really don't know what bird anatomy is, but I'm just going to call them bones for the sake of this. And then here I am with a silicone tool, just trying to make those ridges in between evident, as well as take it away from the robe so that that still shows up once I paint it. I know they're a little bit chunky, but that matches what I sculpted on the chapter master who these guys will be with, so at least it works out. And I think once I paint it up, it's really going to read. And then while I had the green stuff out, I went ahead and took some strands and added it to their robes just to make it look a little bit more torn and frayed. And then put on some patches as well just to make it a little bit more irregular. And then for their heads, as you can tell, the one on the right, I'm almost going for like a Nazgul feel here. So I'm trying to hollow out the hoods completely, and then I'm going to try and paint it up either to be like pitch black or at least have a glow on them. And if all else fails and that doesn't work, I can take a skull from Citadel Skull box and then add them on as a skull mask like the chaplains have. But basically I cut out as many chunks as I could with my nippers, and then I took my bigger pin vise and then just made a hole in there and then kind of rubbed it around to bore it out a little bit, and then unsafely used my X-Acto knife. Please do not do what I did here, because I almost cut myself. And then yeah, I was happy with it. I cleaned it up a little bit more later. But here is my second emblem, which I'm going to try and mimic on the staff. So they have this really cool staff on the Inner Circle Champions original sculpt, but it's a giant Dark Angels icon. So obviously couldn't use that. So what I did was take the Dead Animal Bits box. I took one of the bigger rib cages and one of the bigger skulls from the Citadel Skull box, and using my trusty paper clips here, I'm just cutting off some pieces to have a little bit more structure instead of gluing these things on directly to one another. So I put some of that paper clip inside of the skull, which I drilled out once again with that smaller pin vise, and then attached it on. And then I attached a longer paper clip to the staff itself. I attached a really long piece so that way I could go back and measure it and cut it down instead of gluing something on way too short to start. And then I finally glued it all together to get the final product. Something I failed to record, or at least can't find the footage of, is that I also added more of the Dead Animal Bits, aftermarket box plastic kit onto these models as well. Some of the longer femur bones, some of the antlers, just anything that gives that kind of relic bone feel. I use it a lot to cover up areas that I had to cut off some emblems and maybe didn't get to sand down as well. And then I started to base just like I did on the Chapter Master, I didn't really think this out. Hopefully I refine it as I go through the process. But really just adding stone texture and then mud texture, and then adding dead animal bits and skulls, and really anything I have in my junk drawer that looks like detritus and debris. But for these, I'll let the paint job and some pigment powders kind of really do the bulk of the work. See a little preview of some Blade Guard veterans in the background, which is important because I failed to cover the battle damage on these swords in this video, but that will be coming next. And then hopefully after that, and probably a Redemptor Dreadnought, I'm going to work on painting all these things up. But thanks for watching.